Welcome to the Shared Practices podcast. We are in season 6 on growth, but we are going to take a little pause here and do another book club episode. We have really enjoyed these. We've gotten a ton of feedback. We've had people saying, I've read every book that you guys have mentioned on the show. And I think on the last webinar, someone even asked George, like, what books would you recommend? And he was like, I don't read books. He was just like, nope, sorry. So we're going to provide the books. Don't go to George for books. But I have with me Dr. Alex Sharp and Payton Keller. Alex, Payton, how's it going?
Good, Richard. How are you?
Good.
And I'm doing great as well. Just a nice Saturday morning here. We're recording. It's good to start your Saturday on the good note, you know?
Well, and I love how I introduced both of you in one breath. So like you had to like talk over each other or kind of like patiently wait to introduce yourselves. So I'm planning on like being confusing throughout this interview of just like throwing stuff to both of you at the same time. So I apologize.
I feel like that's the preferred way to do it. So I appreciate that.
Good. Well, Payton, I don't know if I've had the chance to congratulate you via video, audio. We're still not in person, but on your engagement to Olivia. Congrats.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. It's been super exciting. Been a whirlwind of emotions, you know, obviously all positive. But starting to plan wedding things, and it's just crazy, like how different life is from even a couple months ago. So really exciting and looking forward to it.
Well, and you're marrying up. Not only is Olivia an amazing person, beautiful, she's also really talented. She's the one who put together your magazine, and into real estate, all sorts of stuff. So well done, man.
Yeah, she's definitely making me look bad at this point in my life. So hopefully I can return the favor later in life.
I think the only your one of your redeeming qualities is that on Instagram, your like joy and authenticness like come across. Like you are a complete goober on Instagram, and I love it.
Yeah, I mean, like you can't be fake on Instagram. Like
Right.
it's not me. That's not who I am. So yeah, I enjoy, you know, my sarcastic comments and my dry humor, but got to keep it real for the people out there.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Was it nerve-wracking, the proposal?
Oh my gosh. So actually I was pretty good. I kind of like planned it as like a trip that we were supposed to take with my friends before COVID. So it was perfect. I was like, oh, we just need to replan this trip. Like it'll be perfect. And we were like driving over to where the trip was supposed to be. And it wasn't until about like 10 to 15 minutes before we were about to walk into the restaurant that I was like, uh-oh, like starting to freak out here. And it was super perfect because her mom called her and we were walking over there. I was like, yes, like I don't have to like field any questions. Like I don't have to pretend like I'm not super nervous right now. And yeah, it all worked out great. So it was definitely awesome.
Did she know it was coming? Do you think it was a surprise?
So she knew like within the like a couple months, like she knew when it was going to be, but she did not at all expect it was going to be this night. Like she thought it was going to be like Christmas break or like Thanksgiving. So I was super excited about that because we had talked about some things regarding it. Like, cause I mean, like if I'm going to be proposing and all these things, like I don't want to like do
out of the blue.
Yeah, well, and I wanted to make sure like it was what she wanted. Like I didn't want to like propose to her one way and she's like, oh, like I didn't like that. Like, you know, I'm sorry. Like I'm just not gonna leave things up in the air like that.
Do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but yes, it was a surprise.
That's awesome. I know in Monterey you'd mentioned that when we were talking about this, she had her like nails did on standby. Like she knew something big was coming.
That was the best part. I was like laughing so hard about that. Like because it was like a couple months before and she like had started getting them done. And I was like, oh man, like I kind of feel bad, but I also don't.
She knows it's coming and she's like ready, like before, well before it actually came.
Yeah, that's one more thing I don't have to worry about. So I was perfectly okay with that.
Nice. Yeah. Well, sorry, audience, for I had to get the deets. This is important stuff.
And now everyone's in the loop. Now everyone knows.
That's good. So let's start with some books. So Alex, let's start us off. What book are you bringing today?
So I'm bringing Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. It's about sort of the formative years of Nike, how it started from him selling shoes out of the back of his car, and then it becoming the massive force of nature that it became, mainly in like the mid to late 70s. The book, the take home message for me with it was this guy's just dogged pursuit of exactly what he wanted. Like at all costs, he was not going to stop. He had so many obstacles. He couldn't get funding. He was in debt. He didn't take a paycheck for like a decade almost. It was insane, his relentless pursuit of his vision. And that was probably my biggest takeaway from it, was the fact that you can achieve your vision if you just bust it hard enough. The book took a pretty interesting turn toward the end, where he got really reflective in present day almost, and he realized that, I won't spoil it, but there's a lot of family stuff that happened that he feels like could have been preempted had he had a more balanced approach to his life. So the first 80% of the book was all about pedal to the floor, have your vision, get people on your team, grow, grow, grow. But then at the end, it takes an interesting detour to say, like, okay, all things in moderation. Because if I could do it again, I would have not fast-tracked the growth of the company so much, perhaps at the expense of my family. So, like, you're all fired up reading the book, and then wah, wah, wah at the end. But it was really cool, because you hear somebody that's a multi-billionaire and has achieved all there is to achieve from a capitalistic perspective. And then at the end of the day, he's talking about his bucket list and about all of his regrets. And it's like, dang, even if you do reach that billionaire status and you've done all there is to do in business, family is the most important thing. And I think a lot of us that are hardwired for success, it's easy to forget that, and it's easy to say, oh, the family stuff there'll always be time for that. But you need to make that a part of your journey.
Do you have any real life examples of people like this? Because I've got a few in mind. But I just, have you seen this modeled by anyone that that's like said, hey, I just have this vision. I'm gonna push. You can't mention
Oh gosh,
anyone in
yeah,
shared practices.
no,
Good.
and I don't think it really applies to anyone in shared practices, because I think most shared practices people have some semblance of balance in their
Nice.
lives. And I mean, you could also make the argument there's no such thing as balance, but I'm not going to go there. But I know people in my local area that have done, in dentistry and out of dentistry, major professional business pursuits that have cost them their family and have cost them their, I guess, their sources of joy that they didn't realize were sources of joy, ironically, until they lost them. Don't know what you got till it's gone. And you take things for granted, and it's so easy to pursue the business stuff and to say, okay, well, I'm dialed in. I'm going to work 100 hours a week. I'm going to do what I need to do to get to where I need to go. And it's good to have that, but you have to always weigh, what's it worth really? Is this success worth potentially losing my family? And I don't think it is. And to me, that part of the book was more of almost a subtext, almost an epilogue at the end. But the meat of the book was about clarifying your vision, starting a movement, having passion for what you're doing. It's similar to the Simon Sinek Start With Why, because with Nike, it was athletes starting a shoe company and coming up with crazy new shoe models and new technologies for other athletes. So there was a shared sense of purpose, kind of like shared practices. We're all dentists trying to pave the way for other dentists to work better and work more effectively and come up with better methods for running dental practices. Similar with Nike, these guys were runners that wanted to perfect their craft. And no, it was, I highly recommend it, because I think my takeaway from it might be a little different than what everyone else's takeaway might be, but for sure worth a read.
Awesome. Peyton, do you have anyone that you can think of that's like either side of that, of someone who had a vision and built something pretty amazing, or someone who kind of lost sight of what was most important? They don't have to be the same people.
That's tough. Yeah.
Or just any thoughts. Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, it's totally fine. I don't know if I have anyone specifically that I feel like fits that criteria. But I will say, in regards to what Alex was saying, that I've always kind of said, if you're successful and you have no one to share it with, like, what's the point?
Point.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like family is a huge part of that. Uh, I mean, yes, like friends are fun, but your family's always there for you. They're hopefully always around, and I like you see that with a lot of high earners, like people that develop companies, like for example, like Phil Knight. Um, it's not worth ruining your family life to achieve something in your business life. So I couldn't agree more with what Alex was saying.
Absolutely. No, and I think at some point the pursuit of more becomes like an end unto itself. Because there's a certain level where you can provide for your family. That's like step number one. Then you can have fun and have stuff. That's step number two. You can provide financial security for the future so that you're never going to run out of money for providing for your family and having essential stuff. And then you can, and all along the way, you can be helping other people. You can be freeing up your time. You can be pursuing, causes that you care about. Um, and you can start to hit all of those. Like dentistry doesn't scale well into the billionaire realm, and I'll kind of talk about that in my books. But but you can hit all of those really well in dentistry. Um, but you can also just like lose sight of all of the reasons why that you're doing these things. And I think that's the hard part, is knowing when is enough, and not allowing any of those sub areas to like go out of control and like be the person who cares more about stuff or over leverages themselves and all of those things. So there's a bunch of ways you can go wrong, which is people do that all the time.
Well, it's a
It's like,
classic case of law of diminishing returns.
Mm.
You brought up the point of you have this level of income, level of security that you reach that provides basic happiness, basic needs, basic contentment, and then you push much beyond that, then unless it comes naturally and it flows easily, you're going to burn bridges or you're going to overcommit to one phase of your life. And it's really easy to hunker down and justify it by saying, "Oh, I'm trying to create generational wealth, or I'm trying to catapult my family into a different stratosphere." But is it worth it if it costs you your time with your kids, time with your spouse? And in the Shoe Dog book, he talks about partying with his friends, and he talks about going to all these other countries and just like, I don't know, substance abuse. And I'm just like, dude. And at the time, you got young kids at home, your wife's at home, like you gotta dial it back a little bit. I mean, it obviously worked out for him in some ways, but then left him wanting in other ways.
No, and Peyton, it looks like you had something to say along those lines.
yeah, well, I was actually going to say the exact same thing. I just love diminishing returns. I mean, as soon as that's why I smiled as soon as you started saying it. I was like, we're on the same page here.
Nice. No, so there's that side of it. There's two main lessons to take away. One is the vision, the why, the drive, the passion to build something great. And the other is, can you do that without destroying your life and the things that are most important along the way? For me, there was a couple examples that came to mind of having the vision to do something big, and then the ability to like pull it off even when you hit all these obstacles. I actually think of Howard Ferran. So I worked for Howard Ferran in dental school, and got to know Howard. I love Howard. He's a great guy. I also realized, and I'll tell this to him to his face, he's a little bit crazy. Like he's a guy who had a vision to create Dental Town back when it wasn't easy to create a forum. I think he had to pay developers and take out a bunch of, I can't remember if he like pulled out his life savings basically, um, and had some family, trauma and turnover and things going on too with all of that. But he saw what was possible and built something because he saw this could help dentists. This could be a place for dentists to meet online and teach each other and become a community. Um, and so it's pretty amazing to have witnessed that firsthand, but also to realize like this is a very human being. Like this is a person who is not perfect in any way, shape, or form, just like all of us. And if he can do it, I can do it. It was an inspiration to me of like, oh, I could start a podcast. Like I could do something if I had a certain vision and can take it and run with it. Another one was George and I went to saw David Bender's office here in Indianapolis, and he's got this amazing, beautiful 2-story, 18,000 square foot dental facility. And he had the vision to build this. And he's like, you know what? We've kind of built it and we filled it all up. Like, um, and that's the crazy part is they were in a small typical startup and they went from that to now this Taj Mahal of a practice, and now that's full. Um, so there's so many examples of if you have a vision of something bigger or greater and you can execute on it, you can be very successful. But it's super scary and stressful, and there's going to be a ton of obstacles all along the way. And then people look back and they think, oh, that, if only I'd thought of that idea. And thinking of the idea is not the hard part. It's the actually doing it.
And doing it within the scope of keeping your moral compass aligned and figuring out what are your priorities. I think it's important on the front end, and a lot of us are guilty about not doing this, is coming up with what are your non-negotiables, like what has to happen in your life, what has to be maintained in your life, and I will not overstep those non-negotiables. Like Richard, you had your non-negotiables when you were at that crossroads between family, podcast, and residency.
Yeah.
Like you figured out pretty darn quick what your non-negotiables were, and you stuck to them, to your credit. So I think it's important to have that crystal clear vision of what you have to have in your life, and everything else is gravy.
Awesome. No, that's a perfect summary. Payton, you want to say something else, and then we'll go on to your book after your
absolutely. Yeah, it's just you don't want to lose yourself in the process. You still want to stay true to who you are, and like Alex was saying, you kind of take a look at yourself introspectively at the beginning and say, okay, who am I? What do I stand for? And make sure that you are following that compass during the whole process. So absolutely, I agree 100%.
Okay, what's your book?
All right, so I am bringing Everyone Communicates, Few Connect by John Maxwell to the table.
Okay.
Just to kind of give you guys a little background. So I read this book pretty much right as I was entering dental school. So it was kind of going into my D1 year. Obviously, whole new set of people I was meeting, a whole new set of requirements that I had to deal with. So this book helped me out actually a lot with dental school. So the basis of it is that you, in order to communicate, you really need to connect with the people that you are interacting with. So let's say you meet someone, you start giving them all this advice. You start saying like, hey, you should have done this, you should have done that. But you don't connect with them first. You don't see, okay, like, do I have the credibility to say what I'm saying? Have I listened to what they're saying? So the basis of the book basically is that you want to make sure you connect with everyone that you are interacting with. And I found that really helpful, not only in dentistry, as far as case acceptance, talking with patients, professors, but just in life in general. I mean, no one wants to listen to someone that feels like they're not being heard, they're not being listened to. So those principles really have helped me out a ton in dental school, but just in my everyday life too. Like, it's been great, like relationships with friends, obviously my fiance, like it has really kind of shown through in all aspects of my life. And it's been incredible for sure.
That's awesome. Is there any specific, like I can think of some questions that I now ask patients that I came out of the case acceptance season. And I think one of them was actually from Wade Pilling. I was talking about like, how do you quickly connect with a patient? Like, how do you go from I'm meeting you for the first time to now I'm like invading your personal space and asking you to, pay for treatment that's not comfortable. And then all along the way, you've like connected with this person. And so I was like trying to drill down to some specific like questions even of like, how do you break the ice and like connect with someone quickly? And I think Wade said, instead of asking people like, what do they do for a living? Because being in the Army, I would always ask people like, okay, what's your job in the Army? Or do you like the people you work with or whatever? And he was like, instead of asking people what they do, he's like, I hate that question because there's a whole hierarchy of feeling like, oh, defending what I do or feeling embarrassed or proud of, or, whatever they do for work. Um, Instead, I ask people where they're from, or if they're from here. And then if not, there's usually a story of, well, what brought you here? Or how long have you been here? And stuff comes out in that right away. And then the second one is what do you like to do for fun? Um, and all of a sudden, like, getting people to talk about stuff that like lights them up and brings them joy, and that they can like whatever they're going to do for fun, there's going to be plenty of questions that you can ask about them and then connect with over that. So those two questions I found help me to connect with patients in a very short space of time.
Yeah, I love that. The thing is too, like about asking people where they work is I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily associate positive thoughts with like going to work, being at work. So why would you want to bring that into your dental office?
Exactly.
Bring up things that they like to do, hobbies, like things that they do in their free time. So that way they're associating that with you and with the practice rather than, those negative thoughts they bring from work and other places. One thing I also thought was very interesting in the book was it just brings up how important nonverbal communication is. And I know we almost all of us have heard this before, but it basically is saying like only like 7 to 8% of what you're actually saying accounts for like what people believe or what they are getting out of the conversation. Like a lot of it's how you say it, and really most of it is like what others see when you're saying it. So your body language, how you're sitting in relation to them, just a bunch of different factors that aren't actually what you're physically saying. And I know we've all heard that before, but it's crazy to see that actually put in percentage form, how important it really is.
Yeah, and it's hard right now with COVID. I know, everyone's sick of talking about COVID, but you lose a lot of that nonverbal communication when you're, masked up and face shielded up, and everything's kind of layered up. But it is so important, and that's why it's nice when we can, when the world resumes back to normal, like sitting down and having a conversation with people without a mask on, them face to face, where they're not in a vulnerable position in the chair. You're talking to them like a human being at their level, sitting at their level. Alex, has there been anything that you have used kind of in your patient interaction or team interactions that you like to do to connect with people?
I think you and I must have had the same conversation with Wade over the years, because I always go to, what do you like to do for fun? How long have you lived here? Like, those are great feeder questions into getting some good tangible things to talk about. Because I think the key to building that rapport is quickly and effectively, not like not tripping over yourself when you're talking to them, because you don't have a ton of time in a patient interaction to talk for 10 minutes every time. But having that quick inroads to building a relationship before you start working with them is huge. So talking about stuff they enjoy, talking about hobbies. And then with team members, it's a little easier, honestly, because you have more time. They're almost more like a captive audience where you can go bug them and talk to them at your leisure, and they really latch onto that. The key is to do that as democratically as possible and not show favorites, because I've been burned before by favoring some people that are easier to talk to, that I have more in common with, and then it makes the other people on the team feel less than, simply because I don't go out of my way to talk to them as much. That's been some feedback that I've gotten. So when you're going to do that, when you're going to build those relationships with your team, be sure you do it as across the board as possible, especially when you get to like more around 20 team members. It gets tougher to give everyone their just due.
That's great, and thank you for sharing that, because that is something that it's super easy to do. I mean, you take 20 people, and you're gonna connect with certain ones more than others, and that relationship is just kinda easier and more natural. And being deliberate about kind of making time to connect with each team member over the course of a month, or a few months, that you're really getting like a few good conversations in with each team member is a big deal. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're learning in the mastermind right now, a big common topic of discussion is team turnover. So many people in the mastermind are dealing with team turnover, whether due to illness or due to people moving or the people finding higher paying jobs. And I think a large part of retention regarding team members is building that relationship. And a lot of it starts from the top down. You have to be intentional about building those relationships with your team, because if you care about them, it doesn't matter if they don't perceive that you care about them. So going out of your way to do team building events, or even if you can't afford to do team building events with your team yet, just say every single day, I'm going to congratulate them on something. I'm going to find something they're doing well to let them know that they're appreciated, because that speaks to them way more than a 25-cent raise will.
Absolutely. Payton, what do you got?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm really glad you guys brought that up, because I mean, lots of people, when they picture a team, they think like, okay, like 5 to 6 people, like that wouldn't be too bad. But like Alex was saying, when you get to 20 people, having a meaningful relationship with 20 people at a time, like it's tough. Like and I feel like like you saying, you have to consciously think about it, just to make sure you're not putting too much focus on any one area of the practice, or leaving someone behind that maybe needs a little bit of extra attention. So very good points for sure.
The other thing that comes to mind is actually from an interview in season 5 with Rohit. He talked about how scheduling a time, like a lunch, where you just go on a walk with each team member, once every 2 months or 3 months, once a month. And if you don't put it on the calendar and actually do that, and he liked the walking and talking method. So rather than like a formal sit down, it's like, let's just go talk. And kind of getting a pulse on, where are you at in your life? What's going on in the office? What are you seeing? What problems are there? And then just talking about, connecting. I thought that was great. That's a great way to kind of make sure that these relationships don't slip through the cracks, and people who are more shy and more quiet have the chance to speak up and communicate things that they're seeing that you probably aren't seeing at all. So
Definitely.
I love the walk and talk. It's just like, does he live in California? Like, is weather not a thing? Like, I feel like a lot of team members would not want to walk outside in Texas in the middle of the summer, but maybe that's just me. I don't know.
So, yeah, maybe a seasonal walk and talk. Sometimes it's
yeah, weather dependent.
weather dependent. Well, perfect. Well, let's move to the last books here. We're gonna do my 2, and I'm gonna be honest. I'm pretty sure I know which one the insight came from, but I'm not 100% sure, and that's why we're doing 2 books here. But they are very related. They're very related.
That's so Richard.
And I think these are great. We get questions all the time of like, what are some general dental books or business books that we should read? And these 2, in my mind, are great foundational books for understanding what it means to be a business owner. My children are screaming in the background. Hopefully my mic is screening all that out. But so my 2 books, I got the thumbs up here. My 2 books are The Personal MBA by Josh Kaufman, and then Roadside MBA. And this is by 3 authors, Michael Mazzeo, Paul Edwards Oyer, and Scott Schaefer. So these were, I read these kind of early shared practices days. So I can't remember if it was before the podcast started, at the end of dental school, probably like that year between dental school and starting shared practices, when I was just in full like consumption mode, of trying to get my hands on as many good business books and kind of shape my understanding and fill in my gaps in my knowledge. And I recently heard Josh Kaufman from the Personal MBA on another podcast, and he's done a refresh on his book. And it is a fantastic book. Like, I tell people all the time, because there's dentists who listen to our show who think like, maybe I should go get an MBA. And that was like a thought I had in dental school of like, oh, maybe that would be a good idea. Yeah, I'm getting all sorts of head shakes and thumbs down here. MBA is so off scope of what you need as a small business owner. It is designed to teach you how to survive and thrive and lead corporate America. That's what an MBA is aimed at. And so you're looking at organizations of 500, 1,000, 2,000 people. You're looking at large finance departments. You're looking at all these different things that just are not applicable to dentistry. So ideally, it's like if I could go back in time, I would have done originally my major at one point was econ. I got a bunch of the econ courses out of the way. I almost had my econ minor. And if I could go back in time, I would have done like a business undergrad major with an emphasis on small business, because those tend to hit more of these entrepreneurial problems that we have. But I love these books. I love both of these books for giving people a fundamental understanding of the different ways that you can be in business, the different moving parts of a business, and the framework that they set up for helping you understand any business that you come across and how to run a business, um, are really insightful, and they're a great framework and foundation. The specific insight that really stood out to me with dentistry, well, the first one is dentistry does not scale. If you look at these other business models, um, there are plenty of other models where you can produce a product or a service that scales better than dentistry. Dentistry is high touch with, you've got a highly skilled provider working with a highly skilled team with vulnerable patients. That's a one-on-one human interaction. You can't easily clone that exact interaction, that exact skill set of that dentist. It just inherently doesn't mass produce well. You can't go online with it. You can't go digital with it. It has to be done in person. So coming to terms with that, I think that's something important to know, that like dentistry is not naturally a billionaire's business. It can be a millionaire's business if you're doing it well and you're smart, but it will not take off, and you will not be the owner of some 100,000 or $100 million business in a very short time period. And that's okay. That's like we were talking about earlier. It can provide you all of those things that you need, without putting you into that uber rich category. The other lesson that I pulled out of, I think it was the Roadside MBA, it talked about the different types of things that people provide, like the different goods and services. And it made me realize that dentistry is two things. Everyone thinks it's one thing. We're kind of selling dentistry, quote unquote. I know people don't like selling. Get over it. We're convincing patients that they need to take care of their teeth. They have to pay money for it. Um, the thing that is helpful to realize is that the actual procedures and the longevity of our dentistry is one product. Another product is the experience of being at the dental office and getting your dentistry done. And those are two completely separate products. Um, and dentists tend to focus on the clinical excellence side, which is great. Like we have to have that as the foundation of like we're doing the best dentistry in the best way for our patients. Um, Patients have zero ability to evaluate that. Maybe not zero ability, it's like you can tell if something is outright failing, um, because you're in pain or because it's the tooth is out of occlusion. There's a few things that they can evaluate, but for the most part, they can't tell the difference between fillings, the longevity of fillings. They don't have the tools, the knowledge, the skill set to evaluate dentistry. However, what they do have a very good pulse on is evaluating the experience of getting dentistry done in their mouth, and the experience of calling into your office, the experience of going to your website, the experience of paying for their treatment. So that experience deserves as much time and attention and training as we give to the clinical side of making sure that we're excellent providers. And for some reason, when I read that book, like I'm sure other people have like thought about that before, but for me, that's when that kind of clicked into place of like, these are two separate things, and patients don't have the ability to evaluate one, and they do have the ability to evaluate the other. What comes to mind when you guys hear all of that? Let's start with Alex.
They're definitely two sides to the same coin, the clinical excellence and the service angle, and the level of care, compassion, the tangible elements to a dental experience. What I think of when I think of those two, they're not warring elements, but they are different, is I think that the clinical team, which is a subsection of your practice, needs to get trained on both. But every single member of your team gets trained on the compassion, the interpersonal communication, the touch points that stem from Google reviews to first phone call to patient intake to being seated the first time, getting x-rays, all those different thousands of touch points, it feels like, in a dental visit. Everyone gets trained on those because you can screw up very, very easily. Like, it's easy you can screw up clinically too, but it's almost easier to mess up the patient intake process, or someone answered the phone poorly. Everyone gets trained on those personal service related touch points, but not everyone gets trained on the clinical, if that makes sense. Like, you have to have a more wide ranging approach as a business owner to make sure that the service part is treated like gospel, and then the clinical part is too, for the subsection of the practice that pertains to.
Absolutely. I love that, like, this has to be approached from a training angle of your whole team understanding their portion of that experience from start to finish, and how that matters so much. And it's something that you're going to say the same things over and over and over. You're going to come back, you're going to retrain on this, and you can't let that slip, but it's so easy to let it slip.
Yeah, your point about dentists being more comfortable in that technical clinical part, and then not paying attention to or being willfully ignorant of the importance of the culture and the camaraderie and how that permeates to the patient experience. That's the stuff that it's easy to say, oh, that's touchy-feely soft skills, I don't need to know that. But that's the secret. That's how you get Google reviews. That's how you get great patient experiences, and you have to constantly harp on that. You can't just say, oh, well, the front office is going to do what the front office does. As long as there's butts and chairs, I don't care. That's probably 80% of dentists think that way, whether they know it or not, whether they acknowledge it or not. But that's where you need to spend the bulk of your training, because, again, that pertains to everybody.
I think another part of that too is dentists tend to overestimate the experience that patients are having start to finish in their office. And so auditing that and having systems in place to, like, double check on that. And I have a friend who's been on the show, Dr. Oyer. She did a startup in, I can't remember if it's North Carolina, South Carolina, Raleigh. I think I even said the name of the city wrong. Raleigh. How do you say that?
Yeah, it's one of the Carolinas.
Raleigh.
Close enough.
Yeah. Something somewhere over there on the East Coast. And she said that her and I had a phone call. I was driving to Lexington, Kentucky, and I remember distinctly where on the highway we were when she was talking about how she trained her team over and over and over on how to answer the phones. And, like, she thought, like, okay, this is not my first rodeo. I've done this before. I've coached other dentists. They're going to nail this. And, like, a month later, she was listening to some of the recorded calls. She was like, they're not doing anything that I trained them to do. And realizing that, like, holy cow, I thought we had this down and we're growing and we're successful as a startup. but realizing, wow, like, this takes so much training and accountability and support, way more than I thought. And I thought we were good here. So I think that's also pretty common too, is even when people know and care about this, it tends to slip away or get away from us, if we don't have systems in place to audit that.
Yeah, you have to constantly improve.
Sorry.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had a couple thoughts in regard to what you said about your book. So first, just on the patient experience education versus the clinical education. I kind of feel like the clinical piece has always been there with dentistry. I mean, dentists want to do good work. We've been learning that for a super long time. I think the way that practices have changed a lot within the last 10, 20 years is in the patient experience category. So, like, now when you go to a dentist, like, it doesn't feel like a scary place. I mean, you might be scared of the dentist, but it's actually like a nice place to go. Like, everything's updated, like, it's bright. And obviously I'm not speaking for all offices, but the ones generally that are doing well, it feels like a pleasant place to be, or at least they're trying to. So that's definitely where I feel like dental offices have seen a lot of progress as of late. And I think that's really good for both the patient and the provider. Additionally, I thought it was really cool that you brought up the MBA as a dentist. I I was actually considering doing that when I was applying for schools. A couple of schools that I looked at had that as part of their program, and me kind of wanting to get that extra business knowledge, I was like, oh man, that like sounds like it could be something that'd be really beneficial to me, and I was honestly heavily considering doing it, and I'm honestly so glad that I didn't. I feel like
Yeah.
you just learn so much in an MBA that's not applicable to our situation, like you were saying. MBAs are really helpful for people in corporations, but I mean that's not most dentists. So
And if
I
you
couldn't
get
agree
big
more.
enough, you can hire an MBA.
Yeah,
If your
exactly.
practice gets big enough, you hire someone with an MBA, and then that's
Yeah,
just working smarter, not harder.
exactly. Alex gets it.
Well, you dodged a bullet there. I'm glad you did not do the double dip there. And imagine how much free time you would not have for shared practices if you'd done that.
It probably wouldn't have happened, honestly. I don't. If I was doing the MBA, I don't know if I would ever gotten sucked in. Not sucked in. That makes it sound bad.
Are we a cult?
I didn't say it. No, but yeah, I'm definitely very thankful that I made the choice not to go with the MBA.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, me too, because I thought the same thing and looked at the same thing and looked at dual programs. And so yeah, don't do an MBA. Just read the personal MBA and the roadside MBA. And the other thing I was thinking about is how what you just said, dentistry as a whole, I think you're right, has upped their game on the patient experience side of things, which means it's even a little bit harder to stand out. So it's like you got to double down on that even further, because everyone's doing this a little bit better than they used to. So can you do this a lot better than everyone else? Is the way to stand out and differentiate. Or you can, be like George and just have a dental office that looks and smells like a dental office. And I'm just kidding, George. You have a great patient experience and a great culture. I'm just kidding.
Also, wait, I want to go back to that actually. So I saw George's office about a month ago. It's actually like super nice. Like he does not do his office justice. Like it's very spacious. Like it's a very nice place to be. Like I was so surprised because I was expecting this like shack based on the way he describes it. But yeah,
Well, and his team did renovate the front area. I think entryway renovation, it probably looked and smelled more and like a dental practice. But
yeah,
you're right. We give George a hard time. He gives himself a hard time. He actually has a nice office.
No,
Well, George is being silly because all he does is he says, I don't do like the paraffin hand wax stuff. I don't do foot rubs in the chair. Like he gives a good patient experience, and so much of it is about the perception of the patient and how the people engage. Because you don't have to have all those crazy sea salt scrubs or whatever some people are doing. Like you don't need to have all that, but patients perceive a great experience when you and your team are engaged with them. As long as the office is clean and bright and some level of nice, and you're not playing like screamo death metal over the speakers, like you're gonna be fine.
Well, and it goes back to Payton's book too. I think that everyone communicates, few connect. Where if you create an office and a culture where one of the most important things that you do is connecting with your patients, then yeah, you don't need the paraffin wax and the scrubs. So
yeah, and I know
full circle.
They are like intentional about, all right, we want to connect with the patients, make sure they feel like they're having a good experience. Like I know that that's intentional at his practice. So, I mean, he doesn't need the paraffin hand wax. Like it still feels like a very good patient experience without those things. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. George doesn't give himself enough credit sometimes.
It's true. Well, no. So here's the thing: is that George has often referred to me as kind of like a big brother type figure, and therefore the role of the big brother is to make fun of and make sure that the little brother stays humble. And so I often stepped into that role. So I appreciate you standing up for George, but I will continue to poke at him. And thank you.
It's a necessary evil.
Yeah, exactly. Well, great. This has been a lot of fun. I hope that people out of those 4 books, I hope any listeners to this is now excited to go listen to one of those or got some things out of our conversation today. This was a lot of fun. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Richard.
Pleasure.
Thanks.
Awesome. Hey, we'll talk with you guys later, and we'll talk with you on the next episode of the Shared Practices podcast.